Welcome to Inspire Change, a new inspirational and motivational broadcast that strives to empower men in a positive way, designed to educate, empower, and inspire even the busiest individual on the go over that first cup of coffee. Please join me in welcoming Gunter, international psychologist, author, speaker, and producer.
Welcome everybody to this week's podcast. The first part of this podcast, we're going to focus on mindfulness. And the second part will be a little bit more on a topical issue, and I'll get to that a little bit later. So why mindfulness? Well, as you may remember from the last podcast, it is a way of initiating an effective strategy to deal with sort of crisis and chaos reactions that we get. Essentially, how to effectively deal with stress. The term mindfulness has been thrown around for a long time, essentially in psychology since about the 1970s, and it's been progressively more and more integrated into psychological practice and helping clients how to, in essence, deal better with the challenges in life. Now, what I want to do is I want to actually define mindfulness a little bit in different contexts, okay? Because it's really useful, not just in dealing with stress, but can have a very positive impact on anxiety, on depression, dealing with intrusive thinking, all sorts of stuff. Now, I know this from personal experience, having recently had, as you know, some surgery. I had my shoulder replaced. This sounds a bit dramatic, but essentially that's what they did. And one of the ways that I dealt with the discomfort, and I'm almost in a way reluctant to talk about pain because some aspect of it was really well managed through medication. But there was essentially in the first 3 weeks a considerable amount of discomfort that arose with intermittent pain. And when I talk about pain, it's that sort of acute pain that, you know, when you move, it stabs you sort of thing, okay? The discomfort, however, was a different story because it was sort of ever present. Now, one of the jokes that I made with my surgeon was that in many respects I felt that I was using pain medication more for my back, which was a result of lying on a hospital bed, which was one, too short, and secondly, the staff couldn't keep making it up because it was a plastic covered mattress and the sheets would just slide around on it and it would bunch up everywhere, and it was basically really, really uncomfortable. And given a very fragile back from surfing, I was in a lot of discomfort a lot of the time. So in that context, one of the things that I did was from time to time put myself into an extremely mindful state. So what does that mean? Well, basically, it means that I'm going into an active, open attention to the present. Now, a lot of people might go, well, why would you want to do that when you're in discomfort and feeling pain from time to time? Well, one of the big things about mindfulness is that we need to exercise, firstly, awareness. And if you think back on some of the podcasts that I've done before, awareness, self-awareness is everything. Okay? Now, the other part to this process is acceptance. So acceptance is my ability to observe and accept rather than judge or avoid my streams of thought. Okay, so how does that look like in action? Well, lying in this really uncomfortable bed, it would have been very easy for me to focus persistently and consistently on how the bed's terrible, how my back's aching, how that's not doing my shoulder any good, how they should really have bigger beds for bigger people like myself, I mean, I'm sure the bed was designed for someone who was less than 5.5 feet long. I'm being a bit out of line here, but it felt like it was really small. Short, in fact, is the word. Now, I could have dwelt on that persistently. Now, the question is, would that have actually helped, firstly, my mood, secondly, my physical discomfort? And the answer to both of those is no, it wouldn't have made a great deal of difference. In fact, the chances are that it would have made things worse. Firstly, because my stress levels would have increased. And so my muscles would have, in fact, increased their tension, which isn't, under the circumstances, going to help a lot. So I really chose, and this is the third element in mindfulness, I chose through intention to focus on embracing the moment without judging it. Now, obviously that from time to time takes some practice. And, in my lesser than good moments, it took a little bit more work than it did at other times. Now, what I was lucky with was that I've had 30 years of practice with practicing mindfulness, doing meditation, spending a fair amount of time in self-awareness. So all of that history really helped me to utilize mindfulness as best as possible. Now, what I'm going to challenge you to do, in essence, is I want you to take 30 days, and during that 30 days, I want you to, every day, spend 5 to 10 minutes doing a mindfulness practice. Now, I could give you those practices, but the reality is that there's heaps of these exercises on the internet. Now, very, very simple start with this is to sit down or lie down and just allow yourself to be present and conscious in your breath moving in and out of your body. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you want to practice abdominal breathing. All you need to do is sit and allow your breath to move in and out of your body and to be aware of it and not to buy into any judgmental or critical thoughts that might be going on in your mind. Now, obviously, we can do a lot more with that, but a lot of times the more difficult we make things, the harder it is to keep those practices up. So my experience is try and keep this as simple as possible. In learning to meditate, one of the simplest forms of exercise is to begin with a 5-minute candle flame exercise where your attention's engaged with the flame and you are sitting there in relationship to the flame and allowing that to be all-encompassing in your awareness. So that might be a start too. That could be a place that you want to begin doing your mindfulness practice, the beginning stages to meditation. So remember, not only is this good for your mental health, but it also has a positive impact on you coping with stress physically. Your heart rate drops, your parasympathetic nervous system is more engaged, your muscle tension reduces, your adrenals slow down. And so you start to begin to experience a greater sense of well-being. And yes, the stuff around it, like in my case, the pain, the discomfort, the bad bed, all that doesn't change. What I'm changing is my response to it. And I think that's a really important aspect to dealing with any crisis or with chaos in general. We too often get caught up in it shouldn't be like this, it should be different. That is, generally speaking, not helpful. So in this part of the podcast, I want to talk a little bit about something that's very important, I think, in the current sort of circumstances, both politically but also socially. And that is the idea of what is truth. Okay? In this particular period of history, we have seen people make statements such as truth isn't the truth, that truth basically is whatever you want to make of it. So that there's this conception that there is no such thing as the truth. Now, let me put my cards on the table straight away. And that is that fundamentally I'm trained as a scientist practitioner, and on top of that, I would probably describe myself as a skeptic. Okay, so what am I talking about here? Well, firstly, my definition of the truth is fundamentally that truth is the property of being in accordance with fact or reality, that it has some correspondence to what is. Not what is imagined necessarily, but for what I have evidence for. Okay, so in science, one of the things that we tend to do is we establish a hypothesis, and then we go out and we create a methodology and we research it through gathering of data. Okay, so as a scientist, I have a very particular view of what research is. Research is not sitting on the toilet scrolling through YouTube or through some obscure webpage on the dark net collecting ideas and notions, opinions that seem to correspond with my own ideas and notions. One of the things that we talk about in science is the falsifiability. That is, I need to be able to also disprove things, not just prove them. And, in psychology, we know of a situation basically called cognitive bias. And that is, if I'm not careful, i.e. I don't have the right methodology, I'm more than likely going to collect opinions that verify my already existing belief. Right? So why is this really important at the moment? Well, one of the things I've been trying to establish is a really good way in which we can deal with issues like COVID-19. So it doesn't drive me crazy or drive others crazy. But in our current historical situation, we have people in our community who are disseminating untruths, or let me be blunt, lies. There's no other way of describing that, really. So it's been well established that COVID-19 is not some manufactured virus. Now, on the political front, certainly in the United States, the conspiracy theorists like from QAnon and right throughout, and it's been driven by a large part of their leadership, is that somehow there's this massive conspiracy going on to defraud Trump from his legitimate place in the leadership of the presidency. Now, that's all very well, but in both cases, where is the proof? What is the evidence? And it appears that the people who are subscribing to these particular positions are not able to substantiate their position with fact. It is based on opinion, it's based on circular arguments, it's based on attacking whoever opposes that particular point of view. Now, in my mind, that is particularly dangerous. And so one of the things I want to encourage everybody is check your facts. Facts are not interchangeable with opinion. Fact is a fact. Let me put this into context a little bit, is that since we've had vaccines, more people are alive from having had the vaccine than have died. I'm not talking about the COVID-19, I'm just talking in general about vaccines. They are not a deliberate, intentional way of controlling and manipulating the population and reducing their individual human rights. During the 60s and 70s, if you wanted to travel overseas, you had to get vaccinated. There was no question about it. If you wanted to work in nursing, in the frontline medical arena, you had to get vaccinated. If you didn't, you couldn't work. It's not a conspiracy by the government to control you or to remove your individual rights, because your individual rights also have a responsibility to the rest of the community. So I think there's a really important point to make. And I know there's a good chance that, like with my arguments about patriarchy, I'm going to get trolled on this one. And unless someone, and as an open-minded skeptic, I'm open to entertaining some fairly radical ideas. But until someone shows me proof, positive, I'm going to have some serious doubts about it. And when it comes to my health, I'm going to err on the side of caution. So my fundamental approach is going to be better safe than sorry. So yes, I'm going to comply with social distancing. If I need to go into lockdown, I'm going to comply with that. If I have any symptoms, I'm going to get tested. This is about my responsibility to myself, but also to the ones that I love. So I need there to be some critical thinking going on, and I've already done a podcast on that. My thing with conspiracy theories, whether it's about politics, whether it's about health, whether it's about UFOs, is that these are interesting ideas, but do I want to initiate a social revolution around them? Do I want to take someone else's life as a result of that theory, based on that idea? You know, we're treading into some really, really dangerous ground here. So think about this. Following his defeat at the Battle of Actium in 31 BC, Mark Antony heard a rumour that Cleopatra had committed suicide and in consequence stabbed himself in the stomach. Now the irony is that he then discovered that Cleopatra herself had been responsible for spreading that rumour. Now, as we all know, Mark Antony died later on in her arms, after which she did, according to the story, take her own life as well. So, as I said, following through without really critical thought on rumours, opinions, as if they were true, can lead us into some dangerous, dangerous places. And there would be a host of examples of this in our history. Stuff that just got us off on the wrong track, and it cost the life of individuals and many, many other people. And it's a very sad story. So this is important. If you're so skeptical that you mistrust science and medicine, what are you really going to do if you're true to that belief? When you have symptoms of an illness, do you do your own research and come up with your own diagnosis, or do you go to the doctor and ask that doctor his professional, scientifically based opinion? It's a no-brainer. So, folks, there's lots more to talk about in regard to truth, conspiracy theories, and so on. And I will take that up again later, because we're in a really dangerous time in our history. Now, it's also well understood that during crises, we are more than likely to find ourselves caught in the web of ideas, beliefs, attitudes that may actually not have any bearing on reality or the truth. So we need to be thoughtful about it. We need to be educated about it. And we need to begin to trust people who have the training and the background in whatever field it is. Now, on that note, I'm going to sign off, but it's important, so think about it.
Thank you for listening to Inspire Change with Gunter. Gunter Swoboda does individual and group coaching for men looking to grow. For more information on this and the global Making Good Men Great movement, check out goodmengreat.com to get into contact. If you have a topic for the show or would like to be a guest on the air, please email producers at miranda@noirtainment.com. That's Miranda, Miranda, at noirtainment, noirtainment.com. Thank you, and always keep inspiring change.